Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Our show believes that women at all times and in all places should be treated with respect. Here's your moderator, Nadia Jordana.
Hello and welcome to It's a Woman's World. I'm Nadia Jordana and I'll be your moderator today. We have a really fun and interesting show, but first let me introduce the co-hosts. Down here we have Jamela Pettiford.
Hey, thank you.
Hi, Jamela.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here today.
Thank you.
And we have Candy Pettiford.
Glad to be back. Let's do that again.
It's always fun to have you here, Candy. Susan Strauss, Dr. Susan Strauss.
Hi, Nadia. As always, I'm happy to share the stage with you and these other fine ladies.
Welcome. And Ty Goodwin. Hi, Ty.
Hi, Nadia. I'm so excited to be here today.
It's good to have you here today. It's good that we can all be here and have this interesting show. And our guest today is Colleen Szot. Colleen is a legend in the direct marketing and advertising industry. And we want to hear from Colleen. Let's say, start in the beginning. How did it all start?
Writing?
Yes.
I knew at an early age that I wanted to write. It just was very cathartic for me. And I sold my first article for $1 when I was 9 years old.
Is that what got you going?
Yeah. I thought, I can make money on this. I was only making 25 cents an hour babysitting, so that $1, oh my gosh.
What was the topic of the article?
It was all about the origins of Halloween. It was printed in Scholastic magazine.
Really?
Wow. And then I went on to write for Highlights and Scholastic for many years. And then many years later, I worked in Chicago, and I went to the building where they were.
Oh.
And I was just like, it was great.
You wrote for them as a child?
9, 10, 11. Then I
Wow.
graduated to 16 and teen magazines.
Wow.
Wow.
And then eventually you hit the big time. What would you call the point where you were into the adult world and having a what you would call a full-time career?
Probably advertising right after college. I had an emphasis in radio and TV. And I just found that I had a knack for advertising. I happened to get a job as a receptionist at BBD&O in Los Angeles. And the creative director knew I wanted to be a writer. And so every now and then he'd ask me for a headline or a tagline or what would you say about this? And so about 9 months later, I went looking for a job as a writer, and he brought me out a portfolio, and on each ad I had written something.
Wow.
Wow.
What
So
a
I
great
thought that
boss.
was a very generous and wonderful gesture for him to make. Yeah. So I guess I knew I was really good at what I do when ad agencies offered to move me and live all over the country.
And that started, you were in Chicago then when that all started.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I worked at J. Walter Thompson. I worked on the craft accounts. I worked with, I did the Hello Deli with Oscar Mayer.
Oh.
And we worked with the Hello Dolly crowd. And then I worked for Foot Cone and Belding. And they moved me to California to work on the launch of the Miata campaign. So,
Is that the car?
yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, so I did everything there.
So you'd have to say this isn't your average line of work for the average person.
Probably not. Campbell Methuen Estee, which is now Ogilvy, moved me from California to here because they wanted to start a direct response division. And direct response are TV commercials with 800 numbers and half-hour infomercials. And so they hired me, and I found myself the first couple of years just doing new business, calling on this client and this one. And what I heard was, we want to hire you, but not the agency.
Oh.
And you hear that enough times and you think, oh, I think there's something here. So I left, I opened my own business, Wonderful Writer, LLC. And my first retainer client was Nordic Track.
Wow, nice.
Yep. Yep.
So on a day's, let's just say day to day, how often are you sitting? How long, I should say, are you sitting at your computer? What would you say?
Well, since I'm a little bit older today, it's probably 5 to 6 hours, but it used to be as many as 12.
Wow.
You kind of get up and kind of move around a little bit
yeah.
and then sit back down.
Oh yeah,
That's
I have a
long
dog.
time.
He needs walking.
Very good, very good.
I'm really curious about making that decision to leave an agency and start your own business. Like, what was that like for you? Were there times where you were just like, what did I do?
Yeah, and so did my husband. I think for me, I just wanted to write, and I wasn't writing except for new business, pitches and that kind of thing. And even though I had a staff of 6 writers and art directors under me, they weren't writing or designing or anything. So. It was kind of like they were just paying lip service to this arena, and they didn't really want to do it. And frankly, direct response has always been the stepchild of advertising, but it makes almost 10 times more than regular advertising budgets. Yeah, it generates more.
And is direct response, that's on television, of course, but because of the people responding to an 800 number, but it's also the physical mailings and the mail pieces, isn't it?
Direct marketing, yep. I focus primarily on television and radio, but occasionally I will write other things, like for Tony Little or that kind of thing.
Oh, talk a little bit about Tony Little and George Foreman and a couple of the people.
Well, I was very lucky. When I was at Nordic Track, I started to hear from other fitness people. And one of them was Tony Little, one of them was Jane Fonda. And I had a non-compete with Nordic Track. So one year, I think it was 95, I decided not to sign my non-compete. Nordic Track went under about 18 months later.
Oh, wow.
I'm not saying it's because I left, but it's very suspicious. So then I worked on Jane Fonda's infomercial, and I've done 8 shows for Tony Little.
Wow.
And I always go to the set, and he uses cue cards, and he says he likes my handwriting. So that's why I think he keeps me around.
So it's your handwritten cue cards, and of course the idea for the words is yours too.
That's
Those
right.
are your words.
That's right. Yeah, I did the Gazelle Glider, which ran for 11 years on TV.
I had one.
I have one.
And that's unprecedented in the industry.
Now, you've won a couple of awards, and I think you've brought them here, right?
I believe I have.
Yeah, show us
It'd
the
be nice to
award.
see them.
This is my Telly Award. I've won 8 of these.
Oh,
this one
wow.
is for Warner Brothers. It's for their Cold War series that ran on CNN. And I'm probably most proud of that show. I had access through the Freedom of Information Act to look at some files and photos that had never seen the light of day. Wow. So that was absolutely fascinating.
So you write, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. You would write the whole, I don't know if script is the right word, but the whole narrative?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. It's all scripted. A lot of people think that infomercials are just kind of, you just wing it. Not true. Not true. Successful ones are very tightly scripted.
Well, and that brings me to that one line that I wrote down here that you're famous for. And we've all seen infomercials where they say, operators are waiting, please call now. Well, Colleen changed that, and I don't know for what campaign, you can tell us, to if operators are busy, please call again. Immediately changing it from we're just waiting for you, we can't wait to have you call, to we're really busy. You might not even get to call and order. Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's been written, if you go to the web and look for Colleen Szot, all kinds of articles around the world, Polish and Australian and everything, they will talk about my coming up with that line. I came up with it for Nordic Track, and it tripled their phone calls.
Really?
Wow.
And Robert Cialdini, who is a social professor, and he said it proves that people want to buy what other people are buying.
Yes, yes.
And what they maybe can't
Influence.
have.
Absolutely, absolutely,
yes.
yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, when the "But wait, there's more" guy died, the headline was "But wait, there's more is no more." So I think
As his epitaph.
yes, this is epitaph, and I think for me, it's going to be God is waiting.
Right. Now, Colleen,
I hope.
I have a quick question, Colleen. Now, when you come up with, they give you, of course, what they want. They tell you, this is kind of our idea. This is where we're going with things. Do you spend a lot of time talking to yourself? Do you spend a lot of time kind of going through what would I want to hear? What is kind of the target market and those types of pieces? How do you come up with some of the genius things you just mentioned?
Well, thank you first.
Yeah.
When I first hear from a client, I want to know as much about the product as I can to sell it efficiently. And so I write to please me because 97% of the time, I'm their target audience. I'm a woman over 40, I'm educated, I make a certain income, and so if I like it, I just assume everybody else is going to like it, so that's what I focus on. I'll never know as much as the client does about their product, but like the George Foreman grill, I had to touch it, feel it, see it, use it. And that's kind of my mantra with all products. And I do have a lot of inventors and entrepreneurs who come to me with products, and the first rule of direct response is it has to solve a problem. But these inventors or entrepreneurs wanted to solve their problem, not everybody else's problem.
Okay.
So, for instance, foot flush. Anybody's heard of that?
No, that just sounds funny to me.
Yeah, it
Foot
does.
flush.
Where, yes, it's for people who are germophobic. And you flush the toilet with your foot, literally.
Yeah.
I've
And
seen
he
it.
wanted to be on Ellen and have her do the millionth foot flush. And I was like, good luck with that. I also had a guy call me one time from Wyoming. He and his wife loved to go camping. His wife, however, hated to go to the restroom outdoors. So one day he came up with something that allowed her to stand up while she was going to the bathroom. And I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about now.
Yes.
And I said, you know, it's a great product, but it's a very segmented one for a specific target audience. But most important, we can't demonstrate it on TV.
Right.
Very well said.
And it needs to be demonstrable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you have another award, though, too, don't you? From
Well, this is probably the highlight of my career. This is the Hall of Fame Award
Look at that.
for advertising within the direct response field. And this is the last year, I didn't know this before, but this is the last year they were doing the Hall of Fame.
Oh, wow.
So I just got under the mark there.
Yeah, I didn't
So it
realize
was
that.
Very, very exciting. I had to address 2,000 people.
wow.
That was,
And that was in California when you
Yep.
got the award.
yep.
Well, does this mean that after you, there is no reason to have the Hall of
Well,
Fame?
absolutely. I think they just said, no, you know, Colleen's it, so let's just close up
It's
shop.
all over now.
Do you do any of this work for a service other than just products?
Boy, that's a good question. I have been known to do some government spots, PSAs kind of spots. And I do a lot of pitch shows on PBS because those pledge drive shows are very much like an infomercial.
Yes, very much. Yeah.
And so Ed Slott and Dr. Colbert, they just, after I've written their infomercial, they just come to me and say, can you tweak that for PBS? So that's very common for me to do.
So are you out in Hollywood? I mean, do you get into that? That's what that is Hollywood? I mean, I don't know enough
it's
about
advertising. It's the
Yeah.
television field. It's, despite what everybody says about the internet, television is still the most powerful medium out there.
You do get to meet a lot of people in
Oh yes, oh yes. That's exciting. That's
Yeah,
very
it would
exciting.
be.
Yeah.
Who's your most favorite person that you've met?
William Shatner.
Oh, Star Trek. And
Yeah.
how did you get to meet him?
I did a show for him about 8 or 9 years ago for a product. It was a supplement, HGH. It's a health hormone. Yeah. And he was so funny. just we were laughing all the time. And when he came to St. Paul to do his one-man show, I'd say about 3 years ago, he called me up, and I met him at the St. Paul Hotel, and we had a drink. And I mean, you know, every 20 seconds, someone was coming up to him and saying,
I
"We
bet.
love you."
Yes.
But just the nicest guy, and he keeps
is.
in touch. George Foreman sends me a Christmas card every year, but it usually says, "Thanks for the $1 million endorsements." George, put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you.
These are heavy.
Yes.
That's the
Yes.
real thing. Well, I have a question. You also did some work for Shark Tank, which is my favorite television show.
love Shark
Talk a little bit about Shark Tank and what you did with Shark Tank or
Yep.
for Shark Tank.
Kevin Harrington was one of the original Shark Tank members. He was on for the first couple of years, and he recommended me as a screener. Now, what people would do is send in videos of their product, you know. They probably wouldn't talk about sales, but what the problem was and how they solved it and that kind of thing. Those videotapes would then be sent to me, plus about 12 other people, to pick out the best. Or to pick out weird ones,
Yes.
like Foot Flush.
Which adds an interest to the show. I mean,
Oh,
that makes it
absolutely.
better. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And so Kevin Harrington, who's really kind of the king of infomercials, had recommended me, and I did that for 2 years. And it was just hilarious to see what some people came up with. And it was also eye-opening, you know. You think about, you know, a certain problem or something like that, that I didn't know that was a problem for other people too. Yeah, so it was, I had a lot of fun doing it. In Mall of America, when we were recruiting for the new Shark Tank, I was down there, and people would come up and pitch something to me, and then I would say, send me a videotape, or I'm thinking.
No. So what would you say to the 9-year-old girl who is in her own world, who has a world of writing and books, and maybe thinks out loud and wants to do this? What would be your words to the little Colleen inside of you that wants to grow up to be this amazing writer for different folks and travel the world and have the fun escapades that you've had throughout your life? What would you say to her?
Well, I would probably say, don't listen to anybody else, just listen to yourself. My father never really believed I could make a living as a writer. He said, you better learn typing, just as a backup.
Sounds old school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ironically, I supported my parents in their later years, and
Beautiful.
I've done nothing but write.
Yeah.
So it is a full-time job for me. And in the direct response field, I'm probably about one of maybe 5 writers who specialize just in direct response writing. So I'm busy all the time.
Yes, that's another thing. There aren't very many people in the world that are doing what you do.
That's right. That's right. And I decided that I wanted to focus on that because in 92 and 93, when it was first starting out, I would be on the ground floor. And, if you've got Nordic Trek under your belt, that was the gold standard. And I mean, I still hear.
Even though they're gone, they still
Yes.
are.
Absolutely. I still hear David Letterman and Noah Wiley talk about their Nordic treks, Tom Hanks, and that kind of thing. So it's all very, very rewarding. But that's the thing. If you feel like you have to do this, find a way to make a living at it.
Do you
That's what
ever
I've done.
I write, but I'm not a professional writer, and I get so that I just hate it sometimes. So I try not to do it anymore. So do you ever get to that point where you think, oh my gosh, I've got to do this writing assignment? Does that hit you?
Oh, yes.
And how do you get through that?
I think every writer is like that. Well, one thing is I hate to face a blank screen. And so typically what I will do is I will come up with a bunch of keywords that I think would be interesting that relate to the product. You know, efficient, easy to use, 2 million users. Anything so I don't have a blank screen. And then I kind of go from there. My typical process is I'll come up with concepts first. Well, let's do a talk show. Well, let's do a documentary style. Well, let's do a news show. That kind of thing. And I show those to the client, and the client picks one or picks a hybrid of a couple of them, and then I do a rewrite of that. Then I write the CTA, that's the call to action. That is the TV commercial that is all about just selling that product, getting those phones to ring. And then I do a detailed outline because it's easier to change an outline than a script. And then once I have an approved detailed outline, I go to the first draft script. So, but yes, I do have those days. There have been days when I let them go, squirrel.
right. Coffee.
Wine.
Now, do you like to read?
I love to read.
Do you get that time in?
Oh,
Do you get time to read?
Yes. Every night before I go to bed, I read.
Beautiful.
What are you reading right now? I'm always curious to hear what other people's bookshelves have. What are you reading?
Well, I'm a big fan of Anne Rule, who is a true crime writer. And I recently had some surgery, and I thought I was going to be recuperating, but I just recovered like that. And my husband bought me a bunch of Anne Rule books. So the one I'm reading right now is called If You Loved Me, and they're all based on true crime.
Wow.
And it's just fascinating to me how they unravel, you know, that thing. So yeah, that's what I'm reading right now.
Okay.
I have another question. So here's what I think is so fascinating. I've worked with a lot of writers and authors, and often they hate marketing. Like, it's like, oh, the M word.
Yes.
But when I hear you, I know that a lot of what you're doing is quote unquote marketing, but I have not heard you mention that word in what you say. So I'm really curious about, did you study marketing, or how did you infuse that into your writing?
Well, it's interesting. Advertising, of course, is a part of marketing. And the very first year that I opened up my shop, I took out a $900 ad in Response magazine, which was kind of our industry trade magazine. And I asked John Yarrington, who was the editor, can I pay over 3 payments? Because I didn't know if I was going to be able to make anything. And took out that ad, and I was able to pay it in 1 payment.
Wow. Nice. Beautiful.
And so over the years, I would periodically, you know, advertise, just primarily to let people know what I'm working on now. So if you know Tony Little, if you know George Foreman, and I wrote all 4 George Foreman grill shows, they, you know, I did them. And in 2012, of the top 50 grossing infomercials, I wrote 7 of them.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of impressive.
That is impressive.
That's marketing.
That's marketing. That's right.
Yes,
That is
marketing.
right.
Yeah, and I like how your work is standing for itself. You know, how your work, it you know, you don't have to do so much when you do good quality work. And so that's also, you know, just speaking to your work ethic and how you really put into what you're doing so that it speaks for itself. People come to you There it is. That's beautiful.
And you do some fun things once in a while, and the way I think of it as fun things as writing scripts for the occasional sitcom. Tell us a couple fun stories about some fun scripts that you've written, like Mike and Molly. I know
Mike
that
and
one
Molly,
aired not
yep.
long ago.
I've written 2 shows for them, and then they got canceled. But I'm sure it wasn't because of me. I've recently been approached by Chuck Lorre, though, to develop some concepts for young Sheldon. And so I sent him 4 concepts, and he has assigned me 2 of them. And that's the key in television writing, is that you have to be assigned the project. Because if you write a spec script, spec means no money. If you get an assignment to write a script, you get paid.
Nice.
So if you just write a script and you think this is great, and it may well be, and you send it in and they accept it, they don't have to pay you because it's a
Well, first of all, they can't. Most credible companies will not accept a spec script. Yeah, because they're afraid of the lawsuits. You know,
right.
What if 10 years ago we decide to do a variation of this? We've totally forgotten about it, but you know, so that's the reasoning. I started out in college as an intern for NBC out in Los Angeles, and this was in the days when Tom Brokaw did the news, and Bryant Gumbel did the weather, and Tom Snyder did the late news. So it was really kind of a breeding ground for all of them to go on to bigger and better things, and me as well. So Tom Brokaw remains a good friend of mine, and
Well, this is fascinating.
It is so fascinating.
Do you have any parting words of wisdom?
If it's an 800 number product, be sure and do your research. Go online. I do as much research as I can. I do test it out myself. There are some things I can't test out, like Rogaine.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But do your research.
Have you ever turned down?
Every day of the week.
And for some reasons like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Either morally or just financially, I don't think it'll work. And typically, books don't sell well on television. Kevin Trudeau sold a ton of his books, but he also served 12 years in prison. So
Notoriety.
I'm thinking that doesn't really count.
Well, Colleen, it's been so wonderful having you here on the show. I'm
Thank
just
you, Nadia.
fascinated.
I loved it.
And thank you, ladies, for being here with us on the show,
fun.
too.
Our pleasure.
And helping
So
us talk with
interesting to
Colleen.
hear.
Yeah,
Such
it
a
is
unique
It is absolutely
career.
fascinating. Yeah, we're loving it. And thank you all for watching It's a Woman's World. We'll see you next time.